Davis steps under center. Gibson and McClendon behind him. Davis with motion by Richard. Will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh, he doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory.
Left side of the line. Hood standing to Williams' right. Williams gonna throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me? Connor Barth for the possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Connor Barth. Good gosh, dirty!
This is the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. Hey guys, and welcome in to another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's Anthony Pagnotta and Zack Hubbard coming to you on a Friday night here in the middle of July. Some big news today for Carolina, and of course we have a big commitment coming up this weekend, but as I mentioned, huge news for the Tar Heels, and it involves possibly the 2020 season as well for a guy that we just received a commitment from. That's right, earlier today it was confirmed by Tony Grimes that he will reclassify into the class of 2020, and we knew this was a possibility. This is something that we had heard was becoming more and more of a possibility, and with the Virginia High School League sort of dragging their feet on whether or not they're going to play this upcoming fall, even in the spring, Tony Grimes went ahead, made the decision for himself today, and he is going to graduate early. He only had one class that he needed to complete. He's going to get that done before he ends up enrolling on August 1st. And Zach, we're not too far away from talking about him as a commitment to the 2021 class. So this is a guy that is going to bring a lot to the Tar Heels, and now he's going to do it a year earlier than we originally imagined.
Yeah, it seemed like just yesterday we were speaking about him as a prospect, and then we were speaking about him as commit, and now we sit here. It's kind of crazy. We're speaking about him as a future enrollee, like you said, prepared to enroll on August 1st. Just has to finish one government class to receive all his high school credits, and is working with UNC admissions to enroll on that date. And it's an immediate boost to the Tar Heels, and it's one where, like we've discussed, he's the first five-star prospect of this new Mack Brown era, and you already get him on campus.
Yeah, I mean, a huge commitment for Carolina a couple weeks ago. First five-star commit since, of course, Dante Page-Moss back in 2009. I think that, when we talk about Tony Grimes, we've talked about it a lot. A guy that's a shutdown corner on the outside. He's got, a little bit of Marlon Humphrey, which for you has to be very exciting because, of course, you're also an Alabama fan. You follow along with everything that they do as well. And then, comparisons to Kyle Fuller as well. I think a lot of people feel like he is definitely going to come in and have a huge effect. I think the interesting thing is I thought in 2021 it definitely made a lot of sense why he would be able to come in, make some sort of noise out of the gate, because Patrice Rene would be gone. Storm Duck would still be your other starter on the outside, but unless a guy like Kyler McMichael or somebody else just kind of came out of nowhere and sort of impressed that much this season, you felt like there was going to be an opportunity. Now, you have Patrice Rene coming back, which, we know how good he was back in 2018. I know it's a different system, but even early last year, in the reps that we saw him take against South Carolina, and then, of course, in the limited reps in in the game against Miami before he went down with injury. He looked pretty good in the system. And then, of course, Storm Duck, who had a big year last year, looks exactly like what they want to see. I think it's kind of a question at this point, how big of an influence do you think he can have? I know that you're really more of our recruiting guy, but you know the roster a lot as well. You do a great job of keeping up with everything during the season. What do you think the chances are that he's going to be able to come in and have sort of a big effect in his first season?
I think it's really hard to say. You have to look at it from the example of a few things. One that that has been discussed on the podcast previously in terms of the roster and, with other sources as well, is just how much depth this secondary is going to have, specifically at the cornerback position, now that you're getting Patrice Renee back from injury, now that you're getting transfers like Kyler McMichael, having Bryce Watts, in the transfer portal as well as guys as you already have, such as, sort of a standout freshman from last year in Storm Duck, and a guy that, played a little bit of the outside corner, played more of the nickel role his freshman year in Trey Morrison. So, you're really trying to work all these guys in and see, do you have one of these guys playing nickel? Do you have more of a safety type playing nickel? How much rotation are you going to do at these positions? So I think it only adds to what we thought previously, is that there's a lot of depth here at the corner position. It's just going to be a question of how the reps are distributed, and then where does each guy go? Where do you want a guy? Where do you want them on the outside? Do you want one of your corners playing nickel? Do you want a corner playing dime? Generally, some teams will move a safety down there and have three corners and three safety types for a dime look. Are you playing four corners and two safeties? So it's a lot of mixing and matching. It's a really good problem to have, and it's going to be interesting to see. God willing that we have a season, it's going to be interesting to see what Dre Bly and Jay Bateman, as the cornerback and safety coach, respectively, figure out how to create these combinations and use these athletes.
That's the thing that I think is going to be so different about this defense in 2020, even from 2019, is that I think there's going to be a lot more flexibility. Guys that, fit the system a little bit better than even the guys last year. And as it goes along, you're eventually going to get to that point where you're going to see a lot of guys that kind of play that positionless football. I mean, we've talked about it with other guys that are committed in this class, like Ra Dilworth in the 2021 class, actually. Now, I'm going to have to get that down pat because I'm still going to keep thinking that Tony Grimes is part of this 21 class. But, I think that's kind of what you're going to see. You mentioned there's going to be a lot more nickel. There's plenty more depth this year at corner than there was a year ago. I think, in my opinion, if they are... I'm not going to say if they're smart, because I think they're smart about how they even used the guys last year, especially when all the injuries kicked in. But if I was coaching, I would put Trey Morrison back at the nickel, because I thought he was just so much better there as a true freshman. I thought he was good last year, but you could tell that he just really didn't want to be on the outside. He's a smaller guy. It's easier for him to be inside against the shorter, quicker receivers because he's able to cover space really quickly, but he doesn't have the long speed to be able to keep up with some of these outside receivers, doesn't have the height to be able to go up and contend for the football against some of those guys on the outside. So I think that's one of the big things, that if this team takes the field like you're saying, and if Grimes can come in and be the guy that we think he can be, I think it's really going to pay off, is that you're going to be able to move Trey Morrison back to nickel. You're going to probably play Bryce Watts on the inside as well. Those two guys can focus on being on the inside and not have to worry about, well, I may have to play out of position and play on the outside because we just don't have enough depth out there, or we just don't have enough experience out there. So I think that's the big thing here. I think the one thing is that if he does end up redshirting, it's not the biggest deal in the world. Don't read into it if he comes out, maybe struggles a little bit to get adjusted. I mean, this is a guy that's going to be way ahead of schedule. It's very similar to, a situation that it kind of reminds me of is JT Daniels when he first got to USC. He reclassified. He was there earlier than people imagined. Now, he played very well, but there were definitely some bumps in the road at times, and you had to think to yourself, okay, this is a 17-year-old kid. This is not a guy, that's even the normal age of some of the regular true freshmen that you have coming in. So there will be an adjustment curve, but this guy's extremely talented. Now, I think one of the big concerns that a lot of people have when it comes to him enrolling early is if there isn't a 2020 season, which, again, I don't think is going to happen. I think at some point they are going to play because money really is what is going to drive that choice. If they don't end up playing, you're going to have a lot of athletic departments that are going to be in a lot of trouble in terms of keeping their non-revenue sports. Even some of the sports like baseball, even some smaller basketball teams could be in trouble if they end up missing football season because of just how big the revenue is from football. But one of the big concerns that a lot of people have is that we'll only be able to see this guy for 2 years at Carolina. Do you think that that's worth the risk, especially for a 2020 team that, as of right now, seems like, they're probably the second favorite behind Clemson in an ACC that, could be conference-only play for this upcoming season?
Well, I think, first off, I just want to point out that, ultimately, regardless of what we want, it's Tony's decision on what he wants to do and what's best for his career. So do you think, looking at it outside of that perspective, looking at it from, the perspective of a fan of how we want to manage the roster, generally my instinct would be get the talent on campus as soon as you can, for the simple reason of, Mac Brown and the staff have emphasized, we're not trying to, well, obviously we are trying to compete, 3 to 4 years down the line, but we're also trying to compete now. We're trying to build depth now. We're trying to, go to battle with the rest of the ACC and with Clemson, with the rest of college football right now, as opposed to, this slow build down the line. So I think, from that perspective, I think they would want to take him. Even if you are sort of losing a year there, they might rather have him for 2 years in a key, period of time that they're trying to, compete for ACC championships. They'd rather have them there, have that kind of player in there to really continue to build, the brand and build the footprint of North Carolina. We've already seen it, the past few recruiting classes where we've seen North Carolina recruit, at a top level, at a very good level, which you see from Grimes' commitment in and of itself. But, you have a guy like that go out there and you have him compete, like we've said, sort of when he committed, you have a guy like that. It opens up the door in the future for not only guys within that area, within the Tidewater area of Virginia, to come to North Carolina, but it opens up the path for elite recruits to say, hey, that's a place that I want to play. So maybe you're losing a year there. Maybe, in the long run, we might look back and say, hey, it would have been nice had we had him for another year. But at the same time, given the ability, the value he's going to add for you to compete for ACC championships right now and for you to build that national presence and build that national brand, I think there's certainly good things to look at with having him on campus a year early.
Yeah, and I think, the point that you brought up was fantastic. Look, Mac Brown, we say it, all we want on this podcast, and when I've been talking to other people just about him in general, he's got the motivation. He's going to be here longer than I think we probably initially thought when he came back. We thought it was probably 2 to 3 years, get the program, at least attractive to the job market that would be presented at that time. I think he'll be here a little longer than that. But we also have to remember that Mac Brown is an older coach. He doesn't really have time, if he wants to win another national championship and win one at Carolina, to, sort of say, okay, well, we're just going to slow play this, take our time, and just try to build slowly into a sustainable power. So if he can get a guy on campus earlier that could help speed that up, why not go ahead and do that? And the other thing is, and one of the reasons I think this is kind of a win-win, is look, if you get Tony Grimes on campus, he's a home run, he's fantastic. Even if it's only 2 years, that means the 2021 team, 2022 team are going to be extremely competitive. And I think, at that point, he goes to the NFL, probably, could be a first-round pick, maybe early second round. Either way, that's still going to help you on the recruiting trail to sell yourself, to tell people, look, we're a place where you can get to the NFL from here. Then the other scenario is, well, let's say he comes out those 2 years and is good, not great. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people are kind of looking at his situation and saying, I think the ultimate goal for them is to get to the NFL as quickly as possible. I'm not quite as sold on that as maybe some people are. I think they want him to be as high of a draft pick as possible. So if that means that he comes back for a third year, or, could potentially even stay for a senior year, you never know. Because, again, we've talked about this before. I mean, just look at the guys that, are former five-star commits at Carolina. I mean, Dwight Jones, Dante Page-Moss, and Marvin Austin. 3 guys that were solid players. The only one of them that I would say lived up to the billing was probably Dwight Jones, and that was only because he had a big senior year. So there's no guarantee of success. I still think that there's, Tony Grimes has all the tools to be very good. I think, the comparisons that we're seeing already are very encouraging. And I think there's a really good NFL career somewhere down the line. But what I'm saying is regardless, it looks like Carolina is in a win-win situation. The one other thing that I wanted to address with this before we move on, talk about George Wilson's commitment before we get out of here, I wanted to mention, and this was asked by a couple of people, with him reclassifying to the 2020 class, does this open up an extra space in the 2021 class? It does, but it doesn't. So basically, what ends up happening is that, yes, it opens up a 2021 spot, but that 2021 spot is pretty much taken by Grimes in the 2020 class, because that 2020 class now grows to 25 enrollees, and then one, of course, commit that's still, he's going to go the prep route. We talked about Jaden Chalmers a couple of weeks ago, actually, on the podcast. He's going to go the prep route, so he's still a guy that's committed to Carolina. They're holding his spot for him. So that class, in the long run, ends up being a 26-player class, meaning that would shrink the billing for the 2021 class. So really, in the end, it doesn't have much of an effect. Really, what the only effect that this has is that Tony Grimes will be with the 2020 team. He is expected to enroll on August 1st, and then we'll go from there. Of course, as you know, everything right now in college football is sort of fluid. Of course, we know yesterday they released, the Big Ten released that they will be going conference-only play throughout the fall sports calendar, including football. It is expected that other conferences will follow along. The Pac-12 did just a little while ago. Earlier tonight, the ACC could be pretty close behind, and still nothing yet from the Big 12 or SEC. A lot of people still with the thinking that there is a chance that this will be moved to the spring, but of course we'll keep you up to date on all of that. We want to, of course, keep your mind off of all that, and there's an easy way to do that because, well, Carolina's got a chance to add another Virginia Beach area commitment over the weekend. On Sunday afternoon, that's when George Wilson, the 4-star weak side defensive end in the 2021 class, is going to announce his commitment. And, Zach, this is another one of those ones where when you look at it, Carolina entered this race just a couple of months ago, back in May, right after he released his top 7. Amazingly now, Carolina goes into his commitment as a heavy favorite. And once again, with this commitment, we can look at one guy and thank him for making such a difference in this recruitment, and that's Dre Bly.
Yeah, like we've said with Tony Grimes, Dre Bly, his reputation precedes him in this area, in the Tidewater area, and that's sort of carried over into the recruitment of George Wilson. Carolina offered back in May, I believe, after Wilson released the top 7, and immediately became a factor there due to that Dre Bly connection. And now going into his announcement, he had a Final Four of, I believe it was North Carolina, South Carolina, Penn State, and Arizona State.
Yeah.
We've heard some information, about who's the biggest competition, but we continue to hear the name of North Carolina as being that heavy favorite. Going into that announcement, I believe it's going to be on Sunday afternoon or evening. It's something where, it looks like another guy that Carolina's going to add, a position that we've said is one that, it would be nice if they had some more guys, if they had some more depth.
Right.
Really like what he adds from that position is sort of a long lean edge rusher. And, barring something crazy happening in the future, my prediction is still going to stay with North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. 24/7 Sports, Rivals, both kind of hand in hand on this one. A little bit different than initially with the Tony Grimes decision before everything switched. But this one, they are pretty much all 100% in on Carolina. They think that Grimes' commitment also played a big role in that, and I think you're going to see that kind of pay off as well in the 2022 class. This is the first one where I think you're going to see that pay off, helping as well with the fact that Dre Bly is just doing such a great job recruiting in that area. You mentioned it. It's a position in need because after this season, we're looking at him as probably a rush end, fitting that hybrid defensive end / linebacker type player, a little bit thinner, but can really get after the quarterback, good speed off the edge. So it really fits well for that rush end spot where they're going to lose Timon Fox after the season's over. They're going to lose Tyrone Hopper there. We don't really know what Chris Collins is at that position. He flashed as a true freshman in 2018. He set out last year and redshirted. He's coming back this year. I personally really liked what I saw from him as a freshman. I think he'll probably fit that position well, but we don't really know. And then besides that leaves, of course, Desmond Evans. And then they're still got to kind of figure out where they want to go with AJ Beatty, a guy that's 6'5", 250. So he's kind of in between in terms of where he needs to be weight-wise if he wants to go down to the 4-eye technique. But of course, with a 6'5" frame, he's going to be a little thinner at 250 than a guy that's a little bit shorter at 6'1", 6'2", 250. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about that. But there's just not going to be a ton of depth there next year. So getting him in there, potentially, some of the other guys, Keyshawn Silver might be able to have the flexibility to stand up and play that position as well. Adding a little more depth there is something that Carolina definitely wants to do in this class, and this will help take care of that. So, I think going in, I'll make my prediction first. I think Carolina will end up landing his commitment. If I had to say who's the biggest threat to Carolina, I would say Penn State, but I really feel like this is one of those ones we're going in, we're extremely confident, and I think if he ended up picking one of the other three schools, it would be probably one of the bigger shocks of this 2021 recruiting cycle. Is that kind of how you feel as well?
Yeah, I have heard that. No, I have heard that South Carolina has been making a push here for him. So, if there's going to be another team, that'd probably be my pick. Penn State, like you said, has been a heavy, contender in there just due to the proximity to the Tidewater area. But, yeah, it would be sort of a shock at this point if it was that big of a flip, this many days out.
Yeah, so we'll head into Sunday. Of course, we'll have a preview up on the website where we'll go a little more in depth on George Wilson. You guys can check that out. And then, of course, we'll have his commitment covered on Sunday afternoon for you guys on the Heel Tough Blog website. HeelToughBlog.com is where you can check out all that. And then we'll be back on the podcast probably Monday night to break down what he brings to the table if he commits to Carolina, which we fully expect. If for some reason he goes elsewhere, we'll, of course, have reaction to that, tell you where Carolina could possibly go next. But either way, we'll have you covered on both fronts as we get going into the stretch here where the 2021 class will have a chance to wrap itself up pretty quickly. I feel like a lot of these guys, especially with the uncertainty around the college football season, not knowing if they'll be able to take official visits, not knowing if the deadline for early signing is going to be pushed back. There are going to be a lot more decisions, I think, coming sooner rather than later. So we'll, of course, keep an eye on all that, and you can do the same, HeelToughBlog.com. So once again, want to thank Zack Hubbard for stopping by with us. Want to thank you guys for listening, and as always, go Tar Heels!